Fairing Tales, everyone. My name is Whitney. Today we are going to be talking about euthanasia. So if that is a subject that's hard for you to watch and you don't want to watch this video, definitely please feel free to click off. But if it is a subject that maybe you are experiencing this right now or you've experienced in the past, then maybe this is a video you want to watch. But a couple months ago we said goodbye to Sunka, who was my old girl. She had turned 15 in May, and so I had her since before my 18th birthday, a couple months before my 18th birthday. She was born, and then I had her all throughout, the rest of my teen years, my 20s, and into my 30s, and just a lot of different life changes with her. And so we had to say goodbye to her, and that was really, really hard. And I actually tried to make this video multiple times before, but I just wasn't ready yet, and I might still not be ready, but I'm hoping I can get through making this video because it's been on my mind a lot, because I know a lot of people struggle with when to make the decision. And this is going to be focusing mainly on euthanasia for old age, not necessarily for trauma or overt medical reasons. And so if you would like me to make videos on those topics in the future, definitely let me know. But this is focusing on when to make that decision due to old age and just the struggles that come along with that. And so working in the veterinary clinic, I'm more kind of in the camp of you don't want your dog's last day to be their worst day. I'd definitely seen dogs that were truly suffering when their owners finally chose to let them go. And it's such a personal choice, so I wouldn't pass judgment on anyone. But it definitely broke my heart to see those dogs at that point and really suffering. But at the end of the day, you need to be okay with it. And so if you're in that position and maybe people around you are telling you it's time but you're not ready, it's kind of a balancing act. You definitely don't want to get defensive and not listen to those around you, because sometimes they can see the bigger picture. But at the same time, you need to be ready to say goodbye as well. And so in the past, working in the veterinary clinic, we got asked that question all the time of kind of when do you know, or if it was your dog, would you let him go? And every veterinarian I've worked for, unless there was like true trauma and the dog was really suffering and there was little hope for it going forward, they would not tell you that it was time to let your pet go. They would kind of advise you, prognoses and how much your dog is suffering and all the options as far as managing it and costs associated with that, which as much as we don't want those things to factor in, they do. Costs of caring for an elderly dog can easily get expensive, especially if they have multiple issues. So if that's a factor and you're not able to manage their condition because of cost, then that might be a sign it's time, because you don't want them to suffer just because you can't afford, all the care in the world. That's not to say, you shouldn't maybe try to budget and, manage like arthritis and like simple complications that come along with old age or conditions that come along with old age. But at the same time, that is a factor. So if you're unable to afford their care, and obviously you've had this dog, like with Sunka, I've had her whole life. If she didn't have a very good quality of life, and I couldn't afford like a bunch of medications for her, that would definitely be a factor. So that's something to consider. But like I said, I kind of got off track there. Working in a veterinary clinic, that was something we got asked a lot. And it was easy to objectively say, well, make a list of 1, things they need to do to survive, and 2, things they enjoy doing. that adds to their quality of life, and start marking off things they are no longer able to do without either, like, if they need to do it to survive, like going to the bathroom or eating, drinking, and you're having to assist them on a lot of things, you would mark that off the list because you're having to force it. And then things they like to do, like Sunka loved to play ball. She was no longer able to play ball because of her arthritis. She loved to go on car rides. She was still able to do that and get a lot of joy out of that. So things like that that they just absolutely love and really enhance their quality of life. And then, another thing we would tell people is to get 2 jars that are the same size, and at the end of the day, put a penny in it. And if the bad days are outweighing the good days, then that's a sign it's time. And with Shunka, that wasn't a case. It wasn't, some days were worse than others, but it was really every day I saw a range. And so the day would start off good, she was rested and happy, and then by the end of the day, she was just kind of a mess. And so that was really hard because the day started off good. And so going through that with Shunka, it kind of changed my look on it about just the objectiveness, because it is so difficult. So with Shunka, some of the things I looked at was the frequency, was every day ending bad, and then also the overall environment, and whether changes could be made medically, so with like medications or supplements to help her with her issues, or whether I could change anything in the environment to help her. So for example, with her canine cognitive disorder, which is doggy dementia essentially, when she first started having trouble, she'd been battling arthritis and that for years, so it had been going on years, but this past year we noticed we kenneled them, and so she liked to be kenneled with Marley. If you tried to kennel her by herself, she would bark, so we would kennel her with Marley. Well, then it got to the point, I think she just couldn't get comfortable at night, and so she no longer wanted to be kenneled with Marley. She wanted to be kenneled by herself, so we had to kennel her by herself, and that seemed to manage it. And then the last couple weeks, she just could not get comfortable at night, and she would just bark and bark and bark and bark and keep us up all night, so we were stressed out. And then I would get angry at the dogs throughout the day, and the other dogs were kind of stressed out because they weren't getting rest. So it was just an overall, bad environment for all of us, and there was nothing I could do, because if I left her loose at night, she would pace and pace and pace and pace, and then go to the bathroom on the floors and such. And so she wasn't getting any rest if I tried to leave her loose. At least in the kennel, she would get some rest. But we were up multiple times at a night trying to let her out, or we would put her in a kennel and go to bed, and she'd immediately start barking. And so it was just bad, and there was nothing, she was already on medications and such, and there was nothing I could do environmentally that I hadn't already done. And so that kind of factored into it. And another thing I noticed, by the end of the day, she wasn't wanting to go to the bathroom. She would act like she needed to go out, and I would let her out, and then she would just be outside pacing and pacing and pacing and pacing instead of going to the bathroom. And then she would either have accidents on the floor, or she'd immediately want to go back out again, things like that, where in the beginning of the day she would run out there and squat no problem. And so it really got to a point, where that's a basic need they have. And so for a lot of people, she still had that spark of life and that joy. She still got excited when it was breakfast or dinner time, especially breakfast. She would come running in, barking. She liked to bark. And so, but by dinner, she would still get excited, but you could tell she was starting to hurt. And even, she would get her medications twice a day, but just from being up and around. And she slept most of the day, so it wasn't like she was fully active. But, she would pace some and go. She liked to, we called her Fish, because she would pace and circle and get a drink, and then pace and circle and get a drink. So she would do that if she was awake during the day, and then she would finally crash for a couple hours, and then she would repeat. But that constant cycle, by the end of the day, you could tell she was a lot sorer. And we, changed some things around for her, just to help her, with going. We don't have very many steps. We have like two steps, 3 steps going out to the yard. And so there's not very many steps, but there is steps. And it just got to the point where every day was a battle, and I was getting frustrated and angry with her. And I really didn't want my last days with her, because it wasn't her fault. And I would try to stay calm, but we were so sleep deprived at that point, that it was hard to stay calm. And so I would snap, like I would, do well for a couple days, even though I was like feeling so frustrated. And then I would snap. And she was deaf, so she couldn't hear me yell, but, it affected the other dogs because they were like, why is mom mad? And so it just got to that point. So, like I said, a lot of people would still keep pushing at that point. But I see so many, I'm part of a senior dog support group on Facebook, and so many people have that same issue. Like, how do you stay calm? Like, we're so tired. And so for me, I didn't want our last days filled like that. And I could have kept pushing and pushing, but every day was just getting worse. And then we had a solid, week or two straight of her having the same issue. Before it was okay, a couple nights a week we would be kept up. Where, her last couple weeks, it was every night. Every night she was having issues. And so for me, that was a clear sign, because I didn't want, she had given me so much of her life. I didn't want her last days with me to be stress filled or anything like that. And it was really hard making the decision, because for me it's like, well, am I not trying hard enough? I see all these people, and there was other reasons why I stopped working, but part of it was her too, because she needed more care, and that was an added stressor on top of the other reasons. But it's like, I see so many people completely change their life for their senior dogs, and we changed a lot for her to give her the care she needed. And I would do it all over again, 100%. But at the same time, it's like, I didn't want our last days to be like that, not for her or for me. And it was getting to that point, and I didn't want her to get to the point where she was truly, truly suffering. And so that was a choice I made. There was nothing I could change environmentally or medically to make things better for her. And so, before she got to the point where she was truly suffering, I wanted to let her go while she still had joy. And coming to that decision was extremely, extremely difficult. And it always is. But at the same time, there was like a peace about it. And so for me, I made the decision, and I called and I scheduled it for a week out. And so that way we had plenty of time. We had a whole week to just spoil and love on her. And so we took her to the river. She got to play ball off leash one last time, which, be careful, because that almost gave me a heart attack because she couldn't hear me. And she loves to swim, and so she was swimming out in the river, but she also likes to play keep away with the ball. And so she was worried we were going to take her ball. And so she would circle back in, but then she would go farther out. And so that kind of scared me, because I was worried, that she might get too far out and get into trouble. But my husband was with me, and he would have been able to go save her if the need be came. But just be careful, know your dog, and know their limitations, and don't put them in dangerous situations. I was definitely worried, but she was perfectly safe, and she came back in, and she was so happy after that. But so she was able to play ball and go to the river one last time, and she got ice cream and little treaties and got a ride in the car multiple times that week. I just take her into town to give her treats. And so having that time with her, with all my other dogs, it was a little bit more sudden. And so it was minus Flo, who was a whole different story, but the rest of them were pretty, there was a reason behind it. Whereas Sunka, I was able to take that week and just enjoy my time with her, give her brushy. She didn't really like to be groomed otherwise, and brushing she would kind of get fed up with, but she did like it, so I would brush her, and just sit and pet her, things like that, and just really focus on spending time with her. And that whole making the decision was hard. And then once I made the decision, I kind of felt at peace about it. And so even though you're always going to have doubts, that's just part of the territory. But it felt right. I don't know how to explain it with it, because you have, well, what if, but there was a peace about it for me. And so I did pretty well until the day of, and then I was just a hot mess. And then going into the clinic, I was a hot mess. But once it was done, I've lost many dogs, and my dogs have lost many dogs. And so you see your dogs go through a grieving process too. But once it was done with Sunka, there was such a peace. And so for me and the other dogs, they weren't like wandering around looking for her like they had in the past. And normally, a lot of times it takes like a couple weeks, you'll see, and then they'll kind of get depressed, and Boo Boo maybe had like a couple days where she was kind of mopey, like a week or two later. But past that, it wasn't as dramatic as I had seen in the past. And so there was definitely a peace about it, and just the overall environment change. I know, for what I believe anyway, that she's in a better place, and then we're in a better place now as well. And so that definitely made me feel better. And even if you don't believe in the ever after or anything, if you believe there's nothing after death, your dog's still not suffering anymore. And then there's the other camp that, well, I want nature to take its course. But the thing is, we are extending their lives unnaturally, where if it was more a natural thing, they would just pass on their own when they developed a condition, because they wouldn't be able, to get their food or be safe from predators or anything like that. So they would just pass on their own, where we are extending their life unnaturally. So that's another factor to consider if you are in that camp as well. Like, how much are you extending their life and extending their suffering unnaturally? It's one thing to manage things, and it's another to extend things. So that's something to consider as well. But yeah, for me, there was a peace about it once I finally came to the decision, and I knew, she wasn't going to be suffering anymore. We were going to end our relationship on a good note, and I do believe I will see her again, and that she is waiting for me. And so that helps me as well. And so you just kind of got to find the thing that helps you, and based on your beliefs, what's the positive out of it. And like I said, if you are struggling and you're not quite ready, and those around you are maybe saying your dog's suffering, don't get defensive about it. Like I said, you need to be okay with the decision you're making, but at the same time, don't get defensive, because sometimes we are so emotionally involved that we can't see the whole picture. So definitely keep an open mind, but at the same time, you'll know in your heart. There's always going to be doubts when you're making that decision, but look at the situation and, you know, look at what changes you can make. If there are any and your dog's suffering, then it's time to start considering and do the objective things like make the list and have the jars and things like that, because those definitely do help, especially if your dog does have some really good days and some really bad days. Like I said, for Sunka, it was a range of every day. She was really good in the morning and really bad by the evening. um, but it is such a hard thing to make, and do talk to your veterinarian. Like I said, they will not flat out tell you that it's time. Most veterinarians won't. I can't speak for all of them, but most of them won't, unless like it's a true like trauma situation, or the diagnosis, like say your dog got diagnosed with like a really aggressive cancer, something like that. But talk to them, about management and things you can do. Um, and if there's not and suffering, like if your dog has a condition, there's certain conditions that are more painful than others, or if you're not able to well manage it, what's the suffering level there, things like that. Just speak to your veterinarian, because they'll be able to give you a more objective picture, and then of course your dog best overall, and your family and those who are around your dog. So just take it all into consideration when you are trying to make that choice. And at the end of the day, once you do make that choice, don't beat yourself up. I see a lot of people that once they make that choice, they just beat themselves up over and over, like, well, maybe I should have tried this or done this, instead of just appreciating the time they had with their dog and knowing their decision to let their dog go was done out of love and not to extend their suffering. And so once you do make that decision and it's done, just keep that in mind instead of focusing on the what ifs. We could focus on the what ifs and until we die of old age. And so just really focus on the love and the positives of the situation. The time that you had with your dog and the relationship you had over the years, along with knowing that they're no longer suffering. But I'm going to leave it there. If you guys do have anything else you want me to talk about on the subject, or if there's something I wasn't clear about, definitely let me know. And we will see you guys next time. Bye.